When people say that making money online is easy, and you've actually tried and failed, it doesn't just feel frustrating, it messes with your head. At first, you doubt them. Are they exaggerating? Are they leaving something out? Are they just trying to sell something? But that doubt doesn't stay there for long because eventually it turns inward. You start asking questions you don't really want to ask, like whether you're just not smart enough for this, whether you're missing something obvious that everyone else seems to get. And at some point, failing stops feeling like a normal setback. It starts feeling like proof that maybe something is wrong with you. And that's the part nobody really talks about. Because when it doesn't work, there's no shortage of explanations. There's always someone ready to tell you why. They say you're not trying hard enough. They say you lack discipline. They say you didn't follow the steps correctly. And if you've ever been part of one of these programs or courses, you've probably heard this before. They're very confident about one thing: if it didn't work, it must be your fault. Now, here's the problem. You know that some people don't really try. You know that some people give it a half-hearted attempt, get bored, and quit, but you also know yourself. And if that were really the case, if you weren't trying, you wouldn't be here questioning everything. You wouldn't feel this stuck. You wouldn't feel this frustrated. You'd already have moved on. Instead, you're in this uncomfortable middle space. You are trying, you are putting in time, you are following instructions, and it's still not working. That's where things get psychologically heavy. Because now you're forced into a choice, and both options feel bad. Either everyone else is right, and the reason this isn't working is because you lack something fundamental: intelligence, talent, whatever it is that successful people seem to have. Or the whole thing is rigged. The system is stacked, and the people telling you it's easy are either lying or making money from you, not with you. So you start oscillating between anger and shame. Anger at the gurus, anger at the system, and then anger at yourself for believing any of it in the first place. Slowly, almost without noticing, you stop talking about what you're working on. You keep it vague. You change the subject. You stop giving updates because explaining it feels embarrassing. And admitting it's not working feels even worse. What's interesting is that this doesn't happen with everything. If you try to get fit, people usually support you, even if it doesn't work out. But money is different. When you talk about trying to make money online, people don't just doubt the method. They doubt you. They feel offended by the idea that you even tried. As if believing it could work was already arrogant. So you learn to stay quiet. Not because you're lazy, not because you've given up, but because silence feels safer than being judged. Then there's the comparison. You see people online, often younger, talking about how they made it work. And rationally, you understand it. They grew up with different technology. They have more time, fewer obligations. That part makes sense, but the jealousy doesn't come from that. It comes from the thought that they get to enjoy their 20s and 30s with money and freedom, while you spent those years stressed, careful, and constantly trying to make something work. It's not envy of their skill. It's grief over lost time. And that grief doesn't show up as sadness, it shows up as pressure. Pressure to make this work before it's too late. Pressure not to waste any more years. Pressure not to end up stuck in a life you didn't really choose. That's why the timelines hurt so much, because you didn't try casually. You committed. You believed the promise. Follow these steps, give it 12 months, dedicate your focus, and it will work. So you reorganized your life around that expectation. And when those 12 months passed and nothing changed, it didn't just feel disappointing. It felt like the clock lied to you. Not succeeding hurts. But succeeding later than promised hurts in a different way. Because now you're not just behind financially, you're behind mentally. At some point, another thought starts to creep in, not loudly, quietly. What if this never works? That thought is strange because it brings two emotions at the same time. On one hand, fear. Fear that giving up would mean surrendering to a life that feels smaller, more limited, safer but narrower. Not a bad life, just not the one you imagined. But on the other hand, there's relief. Relief at the idea of stopping, of not chasing this anymore, of not constantly measuring yourself against an invisible standard. And that's the part people rarely admit. Failing is exhausting, trying again is exhausting. Carrying hope year after year is exhausting. So the idea of giving up feels like rest. That creates an internal conflict that's hard to explain. Because wanting freedom and wanting comfort start pulling in opposite directions, and you end up stuck between them, not moving forward, not letting go, just suspended. Here's the part almost nobody explains clearly. The internet doesn't show attempts, it shows outcomes. You don't see the thousands of people who tried quietly and stopped. You don't see the abandoned projects, the half-finished channels, the ideas that never turned into anything. You only see the ones who made it. And your brain mistakes visibility for frequency. It feels like everyone is succeeding because those are the only stories being broadcast. So when you fail, your brain doesn't interpret it as, this is hard. It interprets it as, I'm the exception. And instead of questioning the system, you start questioning yourself. Not aggressively, subtly. You just feel smaller, less capable. Like you missed a lesson everyone else somehow understood. The most important thing to understand is this: that reaction makes sense. Feeling frustrated doesn't mean you're lazy. Feeling confused doesn't mean you're stupid. It means you're comparing your real experience to a distorted sample. And that comparison slowly eats away at your confidence, even if you're doing everything right. You don't need to decide today whether this path is worth it or not. You don't need a dramatic conclusion. But you do need to recognize what this process does to your head. Because once failure turns into self-doubt, the problem isn't just about money anymore. It becomes psychological. And if you don't name that part, you end up fighting yourself instead of the situation you're actually in. If this felt uncomfortably familiar, you're not alone.